You're listening to the People Agenda podcast, brought to you by leading HR, workforce and payroll transformation specialist, Lace Partners. Good morning, good afternoon and good evening and welcome to the People Agenda podcast. It's me, Chris Howard from Lace Partners. Thank you as always for joining us. Today we have a very interesting talent and AI related topic, which I wanted to bring up to you, fabulous listener. I'm going to explain the context of it and what we're talking about. It relates to an Economist article that I read. And what we'll try to do is pop the actual article in the show notes, although be mindful that I think it is behind a paywall. So what we're going to do is we'll talk about the context of it and then give our Lace perspective as well. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce our guests and then I'm going to hit them with the fundamentally different question. If you're not aware, and if this is the first time of listening to this podcast, our fundamentally different question is totally random, not related to HR whatsoever, designed to trip up the wonderful guests that we've got. No, of course not. It's just a bit of fun. Let's get intros doing out of the way first, though. I'm going to intro first Gemma Ryall from our talent and skills team. Gems, you all right?
Good, thank you. Yeah, happy on this rainy day.
Yep, on this rainy day. Gems, obviously seasoned pro these podcasts by now. You've done a number of them.
Yeah, always good. Always good to be chatting to you.
And we've got a debutante from our AI team today, so we're going to look after her, aren't we, Gems?
We are indeed. Throw us some difficult questions along the way.
Yeah, definitely. Adele Reid, who is from our AI team. Adele, how are you doing?
Hi, very good. Happy to be here and, of course, love talking about all things AI. So
exactly. One of the things I've always wanted to ask you, actually, before we get to the fundamentally different question, was the singer of your namesake the bane of your life? Because every time people hear your name now, they probably sing things to you. Is that true or is that false?
Very much when I was younger and Adele was all the rave. Yes.
Now, thankfully,
now not so much.
You avoid those people.
Exactly that.
But you cannot avoid the fundamentally different question, which we're going to kick off before we talk about this talent and AI specific topic today. That fundamentally different question is related to snacks, office snacks. I'm holding in my hand at the moment a jalapeno beef stick, which is a bit like a pepperami. Obviously, we're not sponsored by pepperami, so there are other beef stick flavored snacks that are available. And I'm actually not eating one of those branded items. So my question, which I'm going to put to you first, Adele, is what is your go-to snack?
My go-to snack in 2026 looks a bit different to 2025. 2025, of course, not as healthy. And as soon as 26 hit, I am now going for protein balls that I make myself. So I've got chia seeds, I've got honey, some almond butter.
Nice.
Yeah, some other bits.
That is so healthy. Does it make you just sick at Gems? I bet, are you sick in a good way? As in, I'm disgusted in my own processed meat expedition. But Gems, help me out here. You're normal, aren't you? You're not healthy like Adele.
No, definitely not. I do equally would join you in your snack of choice, but as an alternative, do love a bit of toast with peanut butter, Marmite and smashed banana on top.
That sounds random and totally disgusting. And with that in mind, I'm going to segue perfectly into the topic of discussion today, because I really don't want to even think about Marmite peanut butter and smashed banana in it once. It sounds absolutely grim. But what isn't grim is actually the use of AI in the talent and recruitment process that we are seeing more and more organizations have. And just listener, for your benefit, we've had a sort of conversation about this, and Gems has got a couple of interesting stories that she can tell, and obviously Adele, from her perspective, will give a Lace AI view. But the article in which kind of piqued this particular podcast discussion, as I said, it was in the Economist, and the headline was "Job Applicants Are Winning the AI Arms Race Against Recruiters." Now, the crux of the article is essentially that employers, and certainly talent teams, are really struggling when it comes to volume of applications and trying to spot those applications that have, by candidates, been AI generated and AI driven. And so we had a chat about this internally, and Gems had an interesting story, which I'd like you to reflect in a second and just tell our listeners about, which relates to this. But also, Adele, you've written some stuff and you've posted it on LinkedIn about some of the dangers of being able to spot this approach to a blanket-wide AI usage and things that organizations that can be doing. So that's going to be the crux of our conversation today. Types of things that organizations can be doing to spot it. What can they do to tackle the increased usage of it? Pros and cons of businesses leveraging AI in the talent attraction process. We're going to go through all of that sort of stuff. But just as a bit of a case study type thing, Gems, obviously you can't name the organization that we've worked with, but can you tell us a little bit of that story that you told us before, that one of the challenges organizations facing with this exact issue?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing an increase in AI fraud or AI being utilized by candidates. And one of the examples we were given was around an assessment center that had been used, and the candidates had been asked to create a presentation on a topic, and 3 candidates had produced near identical presentations using AI. And so they were able to spot the level of AI generated content in it. Alongside that, other client had come and they'd been doing assessment centers where they'd been doing questions. And the questions had very similar responses because, again, candidates have been using AI alongside the online questions to create their answers. So it's easy when you can see people are using the same answers, but if people are using different AI sources and different prompts, how do you spot that level of use of it? So that's where Adele comes in.
Yeah. Adele, do you want to reflect on that? Just give any initial top line thoughts, then we'll get into some of the detail and some of the questions that I just posed right at the start.
Yeah, I think introduction of AI, and especially applicants using AI themselves, we are seeing a huge amount of homogeneous applications. And of course, then that makes it more difficult to spot the diversity in these CVs and in applications themselves. I think what companies need to look out for is, like you say, Gems, is what they're saying very samey? But also, I think there's key indicators, and I call them AI-isms, which are super easy and quick to spot. So it's things such as those really long dashes that you get from any GPT response. It's overcapitalized titles. And also, I guess when we're looking at this from an applicant perspective as well, if it seems as if there's a lack of specificity around what is being pulled out into these CVs, then I think that's also something that companies need to watch out for.
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting? This isn't related specifically to the talent management process or the recruitment process, but I can start to spot when I read content, I can spot when it's AI generated, particularly things like blogs and things, because they all tend to start off with something like, in a challenging economy, or businesses are often faced with and like that's almost the intro. And I can tend to spot, that's clearly been Gen AI'd. So are there types of, and you might not know the answer to this like right now, but do you tend to spot kind of certain phrases in that sense from a recruitment perspective? I guess I'll leave that open to both Gems and Adele. Are there types of things that we tend to come across?
From what I've seen on CVs, if you have bullet points of explaining your experience, it will normally start with achieved X or prioritized Y or whatever. It starts off with very similar wording and very similar descriptions. That's what I've seen.
Gems?
Yeah, really highly polished communication where it just feels like it's been very refined to the nth degree, and where they don't show examples or references to portfolio of work. That's one of the routes that we're seeing. And it tends to be also more highly prevalent in remote candidate experiences. If you've got more in person, it reduces the opportunity for it.
Yes, it's a really interesting one. And what I want to do, I think I might even title the name of this podcast just to see if we can get the clicks and hits, because there's nothing like a bit of wordplay to get people interested in your provocative title. Is this the death of the application process? I want to pose that to you guys. Do you actually think that with organizations, sometimes organizations are having to deal with, particularly large organizations, thousands of CVs, hundreds of thousands of CVs, and if recruiters are struggling under the weight of this, is there any particular time in the world, do you think, that organizations might just say, let's just abandon the application process as it is and let's just come up with something new? Gems, you're shaking your head, so I'm going to let you go first and then get some thoughts from Adele.
You added as it is at the end, and I was shaking my head before I got there. So I don't think the application process will completely go. Yes, there's risk and there's elements there, but we might see an increase in technology that seeks out some of that fraudulent AI or use of AI to address that. But from an applicant point of view, the two things I think we'll see increase is that portfolio of work and wanting to see the reality of what's being delivered. And the other is more in person as you get to later rounds to refine. Just because of the sheer number of applicants, I don't think you can get rid of it.
Yeah. Adele, thoughts?
Yeah, I also think it will change. So I think what we've seen introduced recently is the likes of the AI interviewer. So I think where normally you would have an applicant and then the applicant would send in a CV application and there would be a decision point at that stage. I think that potentially could be removed. So where you then get that information, it's used as more of a data source to go into an AI interviewer so that the interviewer has information on the job description and on the CV of the applicant themselves, so that AI interviewer is able to tailor its questions better. And then off the back of that, I think probably the decision point as to whether to move the applicant along the recruitment process is probably where I think it would change slightly.
And Adele, I'll stick with you. So that obviously sounds to me like that's actually the role of the recruiter or the talent management professional. Their life changes effectively because certain processes and AI is helping to speed that along. But how do you think that impacts the candidate experience from an AI? Or are we at the stage where everyone is becoming so au fait with the usage of AI that it just becomes an accepted sort of norm that the first part of my process will be AI interviewer style generated?
Yeah, I think you're right in terms it definitely is becoming more of the norm. Whether the candidate accepts that or not, I think there is variability in that. I think from a positive perspective with AI, what candidates are going to see is more of that personalized experience. So if we take the AI interviewer example, then you can have an interview with an AI agent at any time of day that you want. Whereas if you were to have it with a human, you would have to have it within working hours, right? It just increases the speed at which you can get through applicants, but also from a candidate perspective, it makes their life a lot easier. I guess there is also a negative to AI in the way that if a candidate sees that AI is being used throughout the process and there isn't that transparency on how AI is used, that may bring questions to the fore around how is this company using AI? Is it being used in the best way? And it may put off some potential really good candidates.
So, James, I want to bring you onto this. So can I get some thoughts? Because that's interesting what Adele's saying there, because it strikes me as though the key for the candidate experience process is getting the balance right between when you insert the human into the process. Can I get some thoughts about what could businesses be doing if they're looking at trying to leverage AI as part of their talent management process? I might be sat here as a talent director thinking, we need to leverage AI. We want to leverage AI. It's something that is almost it's going to become table stakes given the volume of applications and the way in which we're trying to improve our own processes. But at what stage do I get the candidate experience spot on where I'm injecting the human into that part of the whole life cycle?
And it might change dependent on the type of recruitment you're doing. So early careers might be one route. Your volume recruitment might have a different approach. So I don't think it's a one size fits all in terms of that. Also, in terms of the candidates that you're interviewing, there might, just in terms of thinking about your more neurodivergent candidates that might not necessarily do so well with AI interviewers, and just bearing that in mind. So again, it might be a little bit more bespoke for some types of roles that you're recruiting for and for some candidates. So I think it's a very political answer. It's not one size fits all. So I don't have a direct answer. When you're thinking through your candidate experience and the types of roles that you're going to be recruiting for, just think about where it's going to make the biggest impact. So final stages interviews, how do you make that personal impact? If you go all the way through and you don't have a personal contact, that's just not going to be a great experience for individuals.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that's one of the key things that organizations need to keep in mind. I think there's almost like a bit of a, as the article said, there's an arms race going on, but it's an arms race with regards to AI in general and how to apply it, and businesses trying to get that marginal gains or product efficiencies in all of their different processes they're doing. And recruitment and the talent management process is just one of those. I think recruitment and talent management is certainly one that's adopted it a lot quicker than other functions, because you can see some of the benefits with things like the sifting process. But Gems, I got the feeling you want to jump on that for a second. So go on.
Yeah, I do. You raised a point there, and I think when we look ahead, there will be certain roles, certain capability skills that will need more market competitive. You need to be the person, the employer of choice. And those would be the ones that you'd put your more personalized element in, maybe make your recruitment process more fun, more interactive, more thoughtful around what those individuals do. Where you've got a high volume of skill sets to a low number of roles, you'd be less worried about it. Just another lens to put on it as you're talking there.
Yeah, certainly. Adele, I wanted to ask you about, I wanted to roll it right back to the beginning of the actual process of applying for a role from a candidate perspective, but then also from an employer perspective, and look at the idea of CVs and cover letters. So me, being the rapidly aging human being that I am, comes from a millennial generation of the early 2000s of job applications through CVs and cover letters. Interesting side note, which shows that back in the day, you really didn't have as much spell checking and things as I did, because my first job that I ever went to, I actually said it would be detrimental to hire me. And I just plucked out the word detrimental because I thought it sounded very important. And I didn't realize. And my boss actually read my cover letter after he'd hired me. And he said, I've just read he said, come into my office. He said, I've just read your cover letter. And you realize that you said, it'll be detrimental to hiring me. And really, that says a lot about my proofreading process, that I still ignored that. I looked at your CV and then went on. Now we fast forward to now, where we're using technology with increasing frequency. Are CVs and cover letters even credible signals at all? Are these things that are still measurable? And in your response to that, I want you to link it to the fraudulent side of it as well, because we've all had friends who have embellished their CVs in the past, but now that you can leverage AI to really pull out so much more, it really begs a question around the challenging issue around cover letter creations, how much validity and authenticity you can take from those and CVs. But can I get a thought on that, like the future of that part of the process?
Yeah, I think of course, with AI, then you can over embellish, and then that can cross the line into it being fraudulent. It doesn't change, though, from a ethics policy perspective for that applicant, whether they should or should not be providing valid information. They need to still provide the right skills that they have, talk about the experience. And if AI over embellishes it, that's still on them. The onus is on them to then do the right review of that. I guess from a company perspective as well, it's so important that they have the guardrails in place to be able to check for these AI isms, which could be over embellishing or not. So having those risks surfaced and the mitigations in place. And I think as well, one thing that I would suggest to any client is, before deploying any of these AI models, which open you up to potential bias, right? When searching through all these CVs, it's also about making sure to test these models and making sure that the model itself is testing for potential fraudulent cases before deploying the models at scale.
Yeah, okay, lovely. Gents, any kind of builds on that? Because I've got another question I want to ask about agility before we then move on. But
go for another question.
Yeah, shall I do that? Okay.
Yeah.
Given that I said that I'm going to title this the death of the application ? And as you said, Gems, earlier, it's not really the death, it's more it will change. The process will change. I think what we were just talking about there, Adele, about CVs, cover letters, it's just an evolution of the process. Can I get some thoughts from you, Gems? And then, Adele, you can build on that, about how perhaps it's important for organizations. What I'm getting is perhaps the skill that organizations, the muscle memory that organizations need to think about is this idea of being agile and flexible and being able to adopt new practices and pivot quickly with your recruitment process. Is the underlying sort of message that I'm taking from this, but again, I'll get your thoughts on it, around as businesses, you just need to make sure that your recruitment, your talent process is constantly evolving, constantly agile. So that's a yes or no question. But then the follow-up question to that is, any thoughts on what businesses can be doing to build out that agility and the ability to quickly pivot your recruitment process if you're getting situations like we've seen in the Economist article, which is we can't keep up with the proliferation of AI applications that we're getting?
Oh, some big questions there. Yes. So I actually think that of all the parts of sort of people-related parts of a business, talent acquisition, talent attraction has moved and adopted and changed at a far greater rate than other parts of HR, and has tried to stay ahead of it, has used technology where it possibly can to adapt, and continues to do. So if we look at the rate of change over the last 20 years of how, to your point, how it's changed, massively. Technology has been a big factor in that, and AI in recent years. So I think, yes, it does need to keep up with it. Do I think it's likely to? Yes, it tends to be more so than the rest of the business, rest of HR in that sense. What can they be doing? Thinking about the types of audiences that they're going to be recruiting for, thinking about those highly skilled candidates that are really sought after and that are going to be getting the top pick, and what they can do to bespoke more in that space, and then continuing to put the safeguards around it. So to Adele's point, so you're using all of that technology, AI, in the most appropriate way that gets you the best results, and that's going to evolve over time and requires that close relationship between talent teams and their technology teams.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, one thing that AI does really well at the moment is you will get a lot of efficiency gains from a HR recruiter on the employer side. And I think with that, what it then enables those people to do is think more strategically. So what are the risk mitigations that could be applied in the future from AI? How should I be changing my processes for different types of candidate groups? So I think as much as AI is going to cause challenges where employers then need to start to think about how to overcome them, AI does also provide them the space and time and capacity to start to think about that as well.
We're just running low on time. I've got 2 minutes left. I just wanted to get like a final thoughts, or if there's anything you're going to take away from this process, listener, then take this. So I'll get that from you, Gems, and then from Adele. But just to recap on some of the conversations we've had, are we experiencing the death of the application? I think we've pretty much underlined the fact that's not quite the case. The talent management process will be a constant evolution. AI is impacting it as it is impacting so many other different functions and ways in which we work. There are things that organizations can do to spot the AI isms, as Adele said, and we've given a couple of examples which were quite interesting and a little bit scary, probably more from the candidate perspective, like that example you gave, Gems. Me personally, I'd be absolutely horrified if I got called out for producing a presentation that was identical to somebody else, and that would hopefully, those people who have effectively plagiarized or just leveraged AI to beyond where it's a support tool and it's just a crutch, I think personally that might be a lesson hopefully for those people. But Gems, any kind of final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with when it comes to this kind of idea of the application process, the talent management process, and how it evolves along with AI?
Yes, so the bit we haven't covered is what happens when those people actually come on and into the business, and thinking about how to use that initial phase within having people on board to further stress test capabilities and to make sure that everything that they've gone through is in place. Just the knock-on impact of that rather than what we've talked about today. Yeah,
something to consider. Maybe that's a follow-on pod that we can have a think about as well, that next stage in the employee journey, the life cycle. But Adele, any kind of final thoughts we wrap up today?
I think overall it's having an openness to AI, but also having the ability to challenge when it shouldn't be used, both from an applicant perspective and from an employer perspective. And I guess just the additional one for the employer is ensuring that there are those guardrails in place to make sure that you're not exposing yourself to risks such as bias.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant. We are out of time for today, unfortunately. It's a topic which certainly we can expand on, I think, given the interest in the role of AI across the employee journey, the employee life cycle. Maybe that is something we can turn into a little mini series that we'll talk about ourselves internally. But for now, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Gemma, for joining me.
Thank you.
And Adele, for making your debut. We'll get you on again, certainly in future.
Good to hear it. Thank you.
Hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast as much as we've enjoyed recording it. And if you do have any questions around the talent attraction recruitment process in relation to AI, if you'd like to speak to either Adele about any AI sort of processes, then what we'll do is we'll put links to connect with Adele and Gems in the show notes, or you can check them out on the Lace Partners website. We've got a section which you can see all of our team and the specialisms that they get involved with. But for now, from myself, from Gemma, and from Adele, thank you very much for listening. And we'll catch you next time on the the People Agenda podcast. Bye-bye.